Shut up and sit down.
All right, I'm Terra Walker, and that's Ted Bauer, and this is Terra and Ted Talk.
Okay, so this time we're talking about what candidates should be doing to prepare better for job interviews. We're going to try to make this a little bit more functional, although I'm sure it'll get meandering at some point. Okay, I would just say off the top, because every article always mentions this, and it feels like it should be total Captain Obvious stuff. Like, yes, be professional. Okay, right now I'm not dressed in the most professional way. I wouldn't wear this to an interview. But, yeah, same. But, okay, obviously be professional. Like, look the part.
Are you seriously wearing the same shirt that you wore last Tuesday? By
yeah, but it's been laundered twice in the interim.
Okay, so anyway, sorry.
Be professional, and then, yeah, I would say this gets mentioned like it's rocket science or brain surgery. Like, have an updated LinkedIn. Like, have a LinkedIn with a professional headshot and make sure that it's updated and share some stuff relative to what you're seemingly interested in. Like, you don't have to share like advanced level stuff, but just do like a Google News search for like whatever industry you're trying to get a job in. Share some of that. Then it's going to come off like you're actually invested in that. Okay, so I would say those are the high level things, you know. Sorry about that email ping noise. It's just the unfortunate reality of the white collar hustle existence that we all perpetuate. Okay, so those are some of the high order things. A bigger one that I would say too that a lot of people miss is like do some research on the company. I just like
and don't just go to the website and like glance at it. Like do some Fortune 100, Fortune 500 kind of like accounting level. Find out where their money is coming and going to. Research.
So there's a good site that I just found that I had never heard of called Owler, Owler, like owl, like the bird. And you can type in any company and it'll give you all this news and financials on them and like sales and partnerships that they've done. And like that stuff is valuable because even if you're applying for some low level like HR operations marketing job, like no one will ever respect you inside a enterprise type company if you don't understand the money context of it. So
let's talk about how you're walking down the hallway and the CEO's 2 feet ahead of you and you're able to chime in with, you know, quarterly earnings statements.
For sure. That's a huge deal. And I mean, like, so yeah, do research. And like you said, don't make it like completely superficial. Don't just look at the website. So the interesting thing on this too is that today in like the thread that we met through, we had Glassdoor in it, like kind of like oddly trying to defend themselves about whether they screen out negative reviews or whatever. So if you're unfamiliar, which some people still are, even though they just got acquired for like over $1 billion. Glassdoor is a site. I mean, they have job postings and stuff on there, but predominantly people use it for reviews of employers. I think they also have a CEO review function on there too. So that's how people predominantly use it. I think that's what it became famous for. It's like supposed to bring more transparency to the workplace. Honestly, I have gone on job interviews where I've looked at that beforehand. And if there's a lot of negatives, like I agree with what one of our people online, Scott, was saying today. Like I throw out the ones because that's usually bitter people that got fired. But if you see a lot of threes where they're like, oh, this place isn't well organized, it's not well led or whatever, I would bring that up to somebody in an interview. Maybe not a first interview, but like a later stage interview where you're closer to an offer. I would bring it up. Because I think that's relevant and they should be able to defend that, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's another thing. I know
they should be able to. They should be defending that. Like they should step up and say, you know, this is why we're a 3 and we're working hard to make it a 4. And if they tell you they're trying to make it a 5, know that that's bullshit.
Right.
Because 5s and 1s are
Toss them.
yeah, they're just not, they're not legitimate reviews.
Yeah,
They're not.
5s are like people that way drink the Kool-Aid too much. 1s are people that got like publicly executed in the form of firing.
Right. Here's the problem with the 5-star rating system. The biggest problem with it is in stores, like in retail environments where they say, hey, go rate us. Those employees can get fired for getting anything less than a 5.
Oh,
And that's
really?
true in almost every situation.
Yeah.
So I always make sure that if I had a good Uber ride, he gets a 5.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
because Uber does that. Because Uber and all the food delivery services, you know, how they text you back and go, hey, was your service a 1 through whatever?
Right.
They're asking about the driver. And if you give them anything less than a 5, they will consider that driver for being fired.
Right. Yeah, so, you're right. I mean, I didn't realize that it was that tied to like the hard 5, but I mean,
oh yeah,
you're generally right about that for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that's another form of research you should be doing though, but throw out the outliers. And honestly, I hate when I see Glassdoor pages and there are a bunch of negative reviews and the company isn't responding. It's like, because they have the ability to moderate. So supposedly you can't delete, although I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but you can respond to comments, and when they don't, I think that's stupid. And then if you go to an interview with them and they don't know how to defend what you're factually bringing to them, that seems like a red flag to me too, you know?
Well, no, it's a huge red flag. And I agree with you on that, but I think they should be like not a lot, like I've seen a handful of companies like on Yelp or Google respond to all of the ratings. Right. But like you can go into Google Play and you can see, you know, you get your apps or whatever, and you get these, you know, it's the same. You get these extreme 5 stars and these extreme 1 stars, and their anger and elation are misdirected. They're not even about the product that is being rated.
Right.
And you know, I worked for a pizza company that would actively get their review, or I worked for a pizza restaurant who would actively work to get their reviews deleted off Yelp if they were negative, even though I, having been present for many of those situations, know exactly what those people were talking about and would back them up in that rating.
Right, for sure. So yeah, that's a flawed system for sure. And I agree, like on the retail, like service side, don't be giving out 3s and 4s because it could endanger someone's legitimate livelihood.
Yeah, and when people in retail and service make so little money to begin with.
Right. Right. The other thing I would say on this interview front that always kind of bothered me is people will tell you like, oh, you should go prepared with a bunch of questions to ask them at the end. And like generally I agree with that. But I think that people go prepared with like complete bullshit questions, you know?
Yes.
Like, it's like, hey, what's the culture here like? And it's like, they're never going to answer that for you. Like they're going to say whatever like marketing speak they were told to say, you know? So I just think like, I guess this is where it gets confusing, is that obviously I think you should go with questions, because if you go and you end the conversational part of the interview and they ask you if you have questions and you don't have any, it's probably going to lose you the job, because they're going to think like, oh, this person's not a critical thinker or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But the paradoxical problem for me is if you go with legitimately good questions, I feel like that would threaten a lot of hiring managers, you know, like, oh, I saw that last year Q2 was down compared to the other 3 quarters. Like, what do you think happened there? Like, a lot of people wouldn't even know how to deal with that from someone that's not yet an employee, you know? So that's what.
And we're talking about people that might not have it even considered that insight. If you go in there sounding smarter than them, then those people are going to think you're threatening their position, period.
Yep.
And you probably are, because if you thought enough to go do the quarterly financial research on Ball Aerospace
Right.
before you went in for a freaking interview, and you know exactly how much they spent on this widget and that engine, and why were quarter two sales down? What happened there? You know, or Gates Rubber or whatever.
Right. No, but I think it's like weird because they almost want you to ask the dumbest questions possible because it's non-threatening. So I was at a wedding once, and my friend told me, if you ever get the question on a job interview, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The actual answer that the hiring manager should want to hear is, I see myself having your job and you being in a higher role. But if you said that to somebody, they would freak the hell out. Most guys in like hiring positions, if you said that to them, they would go nuts and you would instantly be not a candidate anymore, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like paradoxical in that regard because you should want people that come to interviews with good questions that challenge conventional thinking. But we all know if you do that in an interview, you're not going to get that job.
Right.
So it's like, that's like a major flaw of the hiring process to me. Like, okay, I got some Adam Grant stuff I can throw at this to make it academic or more academic. So he spoke at SHRM in Chicago last week.
Nice.
And so he says, like, you got his big thing is givers and takers because that was one of his last books. So he's like, you got agreeable givers, disagreeable givers, and then agreeable takers, disagreeable takers. These are like the 4 quadrants, right? So most hiring managers and recruiters want agreeable givers because this seems like the most ideal combination. So Adam Grant says their sunny disposition makes them averse to conflict and too eager to agree. So basically just become a yes man, right? So disagreeable givers, on the other hand, are often a pain in the ass, but more valuable to an organization. So it's like, if you're going on an interview, ideally you should be like a disagreeable person to some extent, like respectfully disagreeable. But it's like you'd never get the job if you did that. So I guess my advice is, if you want the actual job, probably roll over and play dead on all the same bullshit that we know about. And then maybe once you're inside, you can start to impact some change, you know? But if you want to actually do the interview right, just like probably go with legitimate questions. Like, do your research, be strategic about what you're saying. I just don't know if that would get you booted out of a lot of job searches, you know?
You know, it might, but word like that kind of gets around, and your recruiters will coach you to not act that way.
Right.
They'll tell you, like I had a recruiter go, why didn't you ask her any questions? Well, she told us all the information and I took notes. I told her, can I ask questions later? I don't know what I don't know. And I was automatically disqualified for not asking any questions, even though technically that's a question. Can I have the opportunity to ask later?
Right, for sure. And that should be legitimate too. If she gave a lot of intel and you took notes and stuff, that should be a legitimate thing for you to say. But then it's weird, it like screens you out of the process somehow, you know?
Right. And it's stupid because I should have been I'm the only one that took notes. I didn't sit there and ask her the same questions over and over. Every time someone asked a question, I was like, it's in the notes. Like, she already went over that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I'm trying to think what else I would say. Like, the other thing I would say is, like, from a mindset standpoint, like, you kind of have to coach perseverance into yourself if you're on a job search that goes a really long time, because you're going to hear the exact same bullshit interview questions all the time from different companies, for-profit, non-profit, blue-collar, white-collar, whatever. So it can get where you're almost like, the longest job searches I've been in, it gets where you're almost resentful of the whole process. And you kind of have to like coach perseverance into yourself so that attitude doesn't show up in interviews, because then people are going to think you're unprofessional.
Right. And it's exhausting. And I've done that, especially if they're cattle call interviews where everybody's sitting in the frickin' lobby, just like waiting to go in for their 15 minutes of questioning, because that's literally all they do. And then, okay, we'll call you if you're a fit.
Yep.
You know, I would say that if you've been if you can't resist asking about the culture,
Yeah.
because your recruiters are going to tell you to ask that crap.
Right.
I usually ask the recruiters because they've been working with these people and they know the ins and outs. I usually ask the question of my recruiter. So if you're working with a recruiter,
you know,
but I would say ask what the interviewer's favorite part about working at that business is.
Yeah, that's good. The other thing too with culture and going through a recruiter that you're dealing with to get more intel on that is they know turnover better than some internal people do, and they probably know turnover by manager / department better than some people do.
Yes.
So I was on a gig once based out of like Nebraska, and it was like mostly a decently functional organization, like research and consulting type stuff. And there was one division that had like ridiculous turnover all through 2 managers. And it's like, that's a hugely helpful thing to know, you know, because It's like, if you're going towards one of those teams, like don't even get to that interview stage because like the precedent is there. You know, these guys run people out of companies at a record rate.
Right.
So yeah, so I would say like that's real good. Like definitely lean on your recruiter or who you're working with for intel about the company because they're gonna know it at a more granular level than even the company might, you know?
Make friends with the lower level people. Make friends with the receptionists.
Yep.
With the admins. If it's a company that like there's software companies, you can't just walk in the building and talk to people. And in most companies you really can't anymore. You used to be able to kind of just go meet with people in the buildings, and anymore you have to go to a locked door. But go have a conversation. Take the receptionist some donuts or something, a cup of coffee, and have a chat with her about how much she likes her job, or he. Have a chat with them about how much they enjoy their job. Get to know that person. Make it a regular thing for you to show up and make yourself a presence in the office.
Yep. And
especially if it's someplace you really want to work.
I would say too, like another big one is before you start going on interviews, like you can find literally just by doing a search for a company name on LinkedIn, you can usually find 45 plus people that work there.
Yep.
Look at people with lower titles, okay? And then look at what they share. And like there are people that share like articles like about how employee engagement is a crock of shit or whatever. And like look at that because if they're sharing stuff like that, that means that it's not being respected like where they work. So it's like you can glean a lot about what the culture might be like by how the people there play online when they're online for themselves, you know?
Yep.
That's another form of research you can do.
And here's one that I'm absolutely surprised that this is. I've always done this, and maybe it's just the way I was raised.
Right.
But I couldn't even believe people my age were like, "You do this?" And I do it every time. And that's send a physical thank you note for the person's time, not an email address. Send a thank you note that person that even if you write it down and walk it back in the same day and set it at the receptionist for that person to get it. Make sure you have physically thanked even if you don't intend to go back, because I've done that where I don't intend to go back. I've walked out and called my recruiter immediately and said, "Hey, you ever feel like you just wasted a whole hour of your time in an interview? Like this company is not for me." But I always give them a thank you note, and inevitably I'll always be in the picked pool and have to decline the offer because it's not someplace I want to work. But that stuff gets around. It shows you're classy. And if you're working with recruiters and doing things that over and above, they're happy to go to bat for you for a better salary or a better hourly. And for me, I wanted to go on, I worked with my recruiters, but I worked as a temp on purpose so that I would bat clean up after their employees they had placed did something screwed up, which by default netted me better money than what the placed people got. But every single time I've gone to an interview, I've handed the interviewer a thank you note the day after, or, especially if you're in the same town, it gets there within a couple days.
Yeah, I would say like interviewers, anybody on the recruiting side of the ecosystem, like I would say obviously thank you notes to all those people is a good follow up. Next steps, you can always put that next steps question. That was for a while when I was getting frustrated with job searches. That was always my default. Like, oh, I think you told me a lot of info in this interview. I just want to know what you're thinking about timeline or next steps, because that's an actual legitimate question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that gives you kind of that gives you a really good idea. And if they say, hey, somebody will be in touch in 2 days, and nobody's in touch in 2 days, that's basically a go ahead to get back a hold of them.
Yep, for sure. And
shoot them an email, give them a quick voicemail. Hey, just want to see where you're at on the recruiting process. Did you make a decision?
Yep. And I think it's funny, like, people are afraid to do that. Like, that's what, we've talked about this before, but, like, one thing I think is, like, real messed up about the recruiting process in general is that it makes candidates feel like if they try to communicate or want to communicate, that's a bad thing, It's like, everything about it is like, hey, don't follow up with us right now. Like, hiring manager Johnny is super busy this month. And it's like, then why'd you post the job this month? Like, why didn't you wait till he was less busy? So I think it's funny, like, I was always like super ballsy on job searches where, if they say 2 days, like on day 3, man, you can hit them up in like 2-3 different ways. Like, maybe not overkill, but like, I think, like, if they give you a time window and then they don't adhere to it, like, reach out to them and see what the deal with the time window is. Don't be afraid to do that just because you're the candidate. That actually does feel like a strong piece of advice,
Well, yeah, and let's talk about if you had the meeting with the person you're interviewing, your interviewer, plus you send a thank you note, to you send it to your recruiter, but also to the interviewer.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily send a thank you note to the recruiter until they've placed you somewhere.
Right.
I tend to be a little bit more on that side. I definitely make sure that they know that I'm grateful that they got me the interview or whatever.
Right.
Because they are in charge of talking you up. That's their entire job, is selling you. But let's talk about then if they say, oh, we'll let you know in a couple of days, and you have, in a couple of days, they've already gotten your thank you note. I guarantee you it's still sitting on their desk when you email them or leave them a voicemail and, hey, just wanted to check where you're at in the hiring process. Are you ready to make a decision? Would love to chat with you more about the position.
Right.
Maybe by now some questions have come up. Maybe you've done a little bit more research and now you have some questions you want answered. Leave a couple of questions in an email or voicemail. Let them know that you're still interested.
Yep, and you're still thinking about, like, the different, like, elements of the position to the point that you're asking questions,
Right.
I'm trying to think, like, obviously the thank you stuff, I'm glad we touched on that. That's a big one that can screen you out of. I've seen studies from hiring managers where that shit instantly screens you out if you don't do it. So make sure you do that for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously professionalism. And then, like, okay, this one pisses me off a little bit, but I understand the blurring of lines. If you really want a job with a place that's truly a corporation, I would go scrub your Facebook of anything like drinking, etc. related.
Get those profile pictures out of there. Take those anything public, get it out of there.
I would say I've seen stuff that 62% of recruiters drop people for that, or it's either recruiters or hiring managers. I don't think that should be the case because there is a line between your personal life and work. Like, I know legitimately many functional alcoholics that were like really good at their job. It's just like they know how to separate the two.
Right.
But I don't think 1 or 2 crappy Facebook pictures means you're a bad hire, but it's probably going to get you screened out of the process. One of the smartest things that this dude, Adam, Karpiak, who's a recruiter in New York. One of the smartest things he ever said to me is like, if you want to master a job search, think about this. The number one job of a recruiter is actually to find a reason to eliminate you so that they can get the smallest number of people down to the hiring manager. Because no hiring manager wants to see like 80 candidates. They don't think they have time to evaluate all that. So, yeah. So basically, they're looking for reasons to recruit you, to get you out of the funnel, you know?
Which goes more to our point of our last conversation, which was all about where they try to make you say that you're a crap person.
Right.
They try to force you into questions. These questions are designed for you to weed yourself out of the garden.
Yeah, for sure.
And they are ready for your stupid answers about I'm a perfectionist.
Right. They're ready for you to step right in it, you know?
So this cat gets fed at 6:30.
Yeah.
And he starts asking me at 3:30 if he can have his dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny, man. My dog's like that too. He's like, he'll come right up on me, you know? 100%. All right, I'm trying to think if there's other stuff that we need to cover off on for like how to prepare for these, so that I don't want to disturb your cat's biorhythms either. You know, my dog's in the other
He's
room.
got another hour before he gets fed. He wakes me up at 4:30, knowing full well he does not get fed till 6:30.
Jesus
And
Christ!
he this morning faked throwing up on my floor so I would get up to clean it up, and there was nothing. He will literally sit there and make that noise so that somebody gets up and feeds him.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it was a couple of nights ago. What did I do on Monday night? I didn't do much on Monday night. Maybe it was Sunday night. I just went to this bar across the street from my house on Sunday night for a little while.
Uh-huh.
And I get back and I like took 2 melatonin and I fall asleep. This is probably 10:30. I probably had like a tiny buzz. Take 2 melatonin. Fall asleep till like 1:30. I was all pissed at myself. And I'm doing like the worst possible shit in terms of like scrolling through Instagram or whatever, which is like what you should be doing at 1:30 in the morning, especially when you're 37 years old. So I'm like doing that. And then I decide like I'm going to try really hard to go back to sleep. So I do. And then my fucking dog at like 4:45 is like right in my face. And he doesn't normally eat till 6:30 either.
What? You know you don't eat for another 2 hours. Get off the bed.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, get off the bed, man. And then last night, before I was going to bed, I had like a fucking plum or whatever. And he legit like hops up on the bed and is like, what's up with this plum? It's like, no, it's not for you, man. Like I'm just trying to go to sleep, you know? It's fucking funny. Ugh.